4th of February 1931, Plymouth Sound. A Blackburn Iris 3 flying boat has just crashed into the water. Rescue tenders are dispatched immediately. They churn toward the wreckage at 10 knots. That is walking pace on water. The flying boat's crew are struggling in the freezing swell, watching help crawl toward them across an impossible distance. By the time the tenders arrive, 9 of 12 airmen have drowned. Watching from the shore is aircraftman T.E. Shaw. The world knows him by another name, Lawrence of Arabia. He has abandoned fame and enlisted in the RAF under an assumed identity, and he is stationed at RAF Mount Batten. He watches 9 men die because the boats meant to save them were too slow. Lawrence becomes obsessed. He contacts Hubert Scott Payne, founder of the British Powerboat Company, a man who builds record-breaking racing craft. Together they develop a revolutionary hull design, a hard chine planing boat that lifts out of the water at speed, reducing drag, achieving 36 knots where the old tenders managed 10. Lawrence writes the official RAF handbook for the new speedboat. It will remain in use for decades. In March 1935, Lawrence leaves the RAF. 2 months later, he dies in a motorcycle accident near his Dorset home. He never sees what his work will accomplish, but the boats he helped create will go on to save over 13,000 people from the English Channel, the North Sea, and the Mediterranean. They will operate under constant Luftwaffe attack in waters where Germany holds air superiority. They will be called fragile, expendable, floating coffins. 1/2-inch mahogany planking, no armour, petrol engines that turn them into fireships if a single incendiary round finds its mark. Critics measured these boats by their specifications. They saw plywood and petrol and called them death traps. Combat measured them by results. The results told a different story. How did wooden speedboats with no armour protection become the most effective air-sea rescue vessels of the Second World War? The problem that created Britain's high-speed launches was not technical. It was human. Pilots were drowning. During the Battle of Britain, from July to October 1940, the RAF possessed only 13 high-speed launches. Just 10 were operational at any given time because engine life was a mere 360 hours. There were approximately 28 crash boats total, and no dedicated air-sea rescue aircraft. Fighter pilots carried nothing but Mae West life jackets, no dinghies, no dye markers, no radio beacons. The result was catastrophic. Over 215 pilots and aircrew were lost to the sea in those 4 months. The survival rate for a ditched airman stood at roughly 20%. 4 out of 5 men who went into the water died there. This was not acceptable. Pilots took years to train. Everyone lost to the Channel was a trained man the enemy had not killed, but the sea had claimed. Air Marshal Sir Arthur Harris convened an emergency meeting. The Royal Navy offered to absorb the rescue mission entirely. The RAF declined. On the 6th of February 1941, the Directorate of Air-Sea Rescue was established at the Air Ministry. Air Marshal Sir John Salmond, a former Chief of the Air Staff, was appointed Director General. Dedicated air-sea rescue squadrons, numbers 275 through 280, were formed from October 1941. Supermarine walrus amphibians, Westland Lysanders and Avro Ansons joined the launches, but the heart of the service remained the boats, and the boats were built from wood. The Type 2 63-foot high-speed launch, universally known as the Whaleback for its distinctive humped cabin profile, was designed in 1937 by George Selman, chief naval architect at the British Powerboat Company at Hythe in Hampshire. Length was 63 feet, beam was 17 feet 6 inches, draft was 3 feet 9 inches, displacement was 21.5 tons. The hull was constructed using double-diagonal African mahogany planking, 4-inch by 1/2-inch planks with a layer of proofed canvas sandwiched between inner and outer layers, through fastened with clenched copper rivets and attached to mahogany frames with brass screws. 5 bulkheads divided the hull into 6 watertight compartments. Power came from 3 Napier Sea Lion engines, marine conversions of the Napier Lion aero engine. Each was a W12 configuration with 3 banks of 4 cylinders at 60-degree angles, displacing 24 litres and producing 500 brake horsepower. Combined output was 1,500 brake horsepower. 2 wing engines drove outboard propeller shafts directly. The centre engine faced forward and transmitted power via a V-drive gearbox. This configuration allowed the centre engine to run independently for cruising, extending range while preserving the ability to sprint on all 3. Maximum speed reached 36 to 36.5 knots. Range was 500 to 600 nautical miles. The crew of 9 included captain, coxswain, engineer, wireless operator, medical orderly, and support crew. The sick bay could accommodate 5 stretchers. Armament evolved through combat experience. Initial fit comprised 2 Bolton and Paul aircraft-type turrets mounted atop the cabin, each housing a single .303 Vickers K gun. After Dieppe, significant upgrades followed. Twin .303 Lewis guns on freestanding mounts flanking the wheelhouse. A 20mm Oerlikon cannon on a strengthened rear deck, anti-shrapnel padding around the forward cabin, armour plating behind the coxswains and engineers' positions. The half-inch mahogany planking offered zero ballistic protection. Any sustained machine gun fire could hole and sink the boat. The high-octane petrol engines made it a fire hazard. This was deliberate. Wood was not a compromise. It was essential. A steel hull of equivalent dimensions would have been far too heavy to achieve planing speed. The compound curves of the hard chine hull were impractical to manufacture in steel with 1940s technology. And double diagonal construction allowed rapid production, 60 to 120 days per boat, enabling mass manufacture across multiple small boatyards. Speed was the armour. At 36 knots, these launches could reach a downed airman, recover him, and withdraw before the enemy could respond. 69 Type 2. Whalebacks were built between 1940 and 1942 at the British Powerboat Company's Hythe and Poole yards. The first major test came at Dieppe, the 19th of August, 1942. 14 high-speed launches deployed from English ports to support Operation Jubilee, the disastrous amphibious raid on the French coast. They operated in waters dominated by the Luftwaffe, within range of German coastal batteries, surrounded by a battle that was already collapsing into catastrophe. 3 launches were destroyed. HSL-122, HSL-123, and HSL-147 were lost to enemy action. At least 10 crew members were killed. Flying Officer John Richard Lessell Hill, skipper of HSL-122, died with his entire crew. HSL-186 took an incendiary bullet that passed clean through a petrol tank amidships. The boat should have become a fireball, but the self-sealing rubber covering held. The round punched through. No fire ignited. HSL-186 survived and continued operating. The losses at Dieppe triggered the armament upgrades that defined all subsequent variants. Heavier guns, more armour padding, better protection for critical positions. But the fundamental doctrine remained unchanged. Speed was survival. Get in fast. Get the airmen. Get out faster. Malta proved the doctrine worked in the most hostile conditions imaginable. HSL-107 at Califrana was credited with 86 live rescues by the end of 1944. Until autumn 1941, it was the only dedicated rescue boat on the island. Malta was under near constant air attack. The Luftwaffe and the Regia Aeronautica bombed the harbours daily. HSL-107 operated anyway. HSL-128 at Malta was subjected to enemy attack on 5 separate occasions. It survived all 5. The Malta Air Sea Rescue Unit collectively achieved over 270 pickups during the war, operating from an island where simply existing required courage. D-Day was the largest air-sea rescue operation of the war, 93 launches deployed to support the Normandy invasion. On the 6th of June 1944 alone, 163 aircrew and 60 other personnel were rescued. The June total reached 355. Beyond rescue work, the launches were assigned a classified mission. They provided guiding searchlights for aircraft carrying 16,000 paratroopers to drop zones behind Omaha and Utah beaches. Wooden speedboats, fragile and expendable, helping guide the largest airborne operation in history. The service had grown from 10 operational launches during the Battle of Britain to 93 at D-Day. The survival rate for ditched aircrew climbed from 20% to over 60%. By war's end, British Air Sea Rescue Services had saved approximately 13,629 people, comprising roughly 5,721 Allied aircrew, 277 enemy aircrew, and over 4,600 non-aircrew including soldiers, sailors, and civilians. If you're enjoying this, subscribing takes a second and supports the channel. The Germans had built their air sea rescue service 6 years before Britain even began. The Zienotienst was founded in 1935 by Lieutenant Colonel Konrad Goltz. It was the world's first organised air-sea rescue service, and at the war's outset it was significantly ahead of anything the British possessed. The Cenotians deployed 12 to 14 rescue flotillas across all European seas from the Arctic to the Black Sea. Their primary rescue aircraft was the Heinkel He-59, a twin-engine biplane floatplane painted white with Red Cross markings. The air-sea rescue variant carried 6 inflatable dinghies, a hoist for lifting survivors, electrically heated sleeping bags, and a searchlight. Its critical advantage was that it could land directly on the water beside downed airmen. Germany also deployed the Rettungsboje, the rescue buoy. Approximately 100 yellow-painted buoys were anchored across the English Channel, each containing 4 bunks, dry clothing, emergency rations, drinking water, an alcohol stove, cognac, cigarettes, and an automatic SOS wireless transmitter. The RAF nicknamed them lobster pots. Both British and German patrol boats checked and restocked the buoys regardless of the occupant's nationality. German aircrew carried inflatable dinghies and fluorescent dye markers from the start. British pilots initially had neither. The RAF later copied the German one-man dinghy design, an explicit acknowledgement that the Cenotians system was ahead in key respects. The Cenotians recorded 11,561 total rescues during the war. British Air-Sea Rescue achieved approximately 13,629. Raw numbers tell only part of the story. The geographic asymmetry was decisive. An RAF pilot downed over England walked back to base. A Luftwaffe pilot downed over England became a prisoner regardless of rescue capability. Over the Channel, German pilots, especially Bf 109 pilots with extremely limited fuel, frequently went down in the widest stretches where recovery was hardest. Growing Allied air superiority from 1941 onward made German rescue operations progressively more dangerous. Cenotians' losses reached 278 killed and 114 missing by war's end. The British decision to attack her 59 floatplanes, ordered in Air Ministry Bulletin 1254 on the 20th of July 1940, after a downed aircraft was found with convoy positions logged in the pilot's notes, forced the Germans to abandon Red Cross markings and arm their rescue aircraft. Operations became slower and attracted more hostile attention. Churchill defended the policy bluntly. Britain did not recognise this means of rescuing enemy pilots who had been shot down in action so that they might return to bomb the civilian population again. The German system started earlier and better equipped. The British system adapted faster and achieved greater scale. By war's end, the fragile wooden launches had outperformed the purpose-built German service in total rescues despite entering the war 6 years behind. Think back to Plymouth Sound. 4th of February 1931. Lawrence of Arabia watches 9 men drown because help was too slow, 10 knots across the water while lungs fill with seawater. He decides this cannot happen again. 14 years later, the boats his work made possible have saved 13,000 lives. The critics who called half-inch mahogany fragile were wrong. The skeptics who said petrol engines made the boats floating bombs were wrong. The planners who doubted wooden speedboats could operate under Luftwaffe attack were wrong. At Dieppe, HSL 186 took an incendiary round through its fuel tank and survived. At Malta, HSL 128 was attacked 5 times and kept operating. At D-Day, 93 launches rescued 355 people in a single month. The German Cenotians had a 6-year head start. Purpose-built rescue aircraft, floatplanes that landed on the water, rescue buoys anchored across the Channel. The British had wooden speedboats with 3 converted aero engines and half-inch mahogany hulls. 13,000 people came home because of those boats. The sea did not have them. The fragile boats made certain of that. 36 knots of mahogany and petrol across hostile water. Speed as armour, design as doctrine. 13,000 lives as vindication.